Don't You? Recorded live.
Good evening. This is the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, which is sponsored by the Black Science Fiction Society. This is Penelope Flynn. On this lovely October 10th, 2014 edition of the show, this evening we have as our guest, writer and publisher, Cerece Rennie Murphy. Cerece, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Penelope?
So far, so good. And I guess what we'll do is we'll just start jumping right in with the questions. So I guess the first thing, and we always ask everyone, is to tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Are you only child, your siblings, and your religious affiliations, if any, and where you live now? So let's start with where were you born?
I am a proud Washingtonian. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., in what's known as the Columbia Heights neighborhood, but for those of you who know, it's 14th and Park Road when I was growing up. That says a lot about me right there, because I just wouldn't be who I am if I wasn't raised in the nation's capital, and just so many wonderful experiences and opportunities that really are unique within the country and the world. So that's the first thing. I am the daughter of two parents from Grenada and Trinidad. My parents came to this country in their late teens, early 20s to go to Howard University, and I was raised about 5 blocks from Howard. And I have, 5 siblings that range in age from 43 to 9. So I have a large family, and we're all pretty close, so it's great. That's kind of my family.
Well, how about any religious affiliation? Because sometimes we know our religion does inform on the way we write and our focus. So does your religious background at all show itself, especially when you have something called the Order of the SEERS? I think
yes,
sort of a religious order in the background.
Absolutely. Well, I was raised Catholic, although I'm not Catholic anymore, and I would say that I'm Christian, but only because I think it's too late to be anything else. Christianity is the lens, and Jesus, is the lens through which I kind of understand spirituality. Mm-hmm. So, I've been in a Buddhist temple, I'm looking up and I'm like, hey, Jesus, how you doing? I mean, it's just kind of how I understand. It's, as I said, it's the lens through which I kind of understand spirituality. So I am Christian, but I'm a person that believes that there are many paths to understanding God. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of my religious or spiritual background. I consider myself a deeply spiritual, though not at all religious person. And I think that it definitely informed, because Order of the SEERS is a deeply spiritual book, and definitely informed and influenced the writing of the book. I think my whole spiritual journey and just kind of discovering God for myself and learning what a personal relationship with God could mean, and then what it could do. Definitely, that whole journey is definitely a part of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. When we first started, you said you were very proud Washingtonian. Are you still a resident of the D.C. area?
Oh, I wish. No, I live just outside of Washington, D.C. now. My husband and I'm married with 2 young children. Our youngest is 3 and our oldest is 6. And we had to move outside of the city. My son had very terrible allergies, and we used to live right in the heart of D.C., and in a very old house in D.C. Mm-hmm. It was built in 1909, and we had tried everything. He has terrible allergies and asthma, which he got from his mom. Mm. And after years of going to the emergency room every other weekend for his asthma and his allergies, our pediatrician just told us we might want to try a different environment. And so we moved just outside of D.C., and it has made all the difference in his health. it's actually shocking. Before we moved, we used to, as I said, go to the emergency room, particularly during the winter and the spring and allergy season, every other weekend, and we haven't gone. We moved out of D.C. 3 years ago. We haven't gone to the emergency room for his allergies or asthma once.
Wow.
Since we moved. Yeah. So, but when the kids go to school and my husband and I talk about moving back, so we still have a home there, and so we're looking forward to it. I'm a city girl. I miss it.
Well, that's nice. You have something to look forward to 15 years from now when you do your empty nest syndrome.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right. So, as a writer, I mean, you grew up in D.C., you have this rich, background, culturally from family life.
Absolutely.
And also with regard to, the area. So were these things grist for the mill in you becoming a writer? When did your talent or your desire to write emerge? Was it when you were young, or was it something that happened more recently?
I've written poetry since I was about 11. I mean, D.C. and where I grew up in particular, it was a very diverse area. And my mom was always taking me to different museums and places where I could learn about different cultures and different, different art and different just ways of expressing yourself and being in the world. I always loved art, and I loved all of those things, but I never saw myself as a writer. I wrote poetry, but I thought, that's just my own personal expression. I never shared it with anybody and never wanted to. And I, whenever I would think about an idea for a book, I always told myself I didn't have the attention span to write. I've been an avid reader, since I was little. My mom tells me when she would take me to the toy store, I would ask for a book instead of a toy. So I've always loved stories, and my older sister would tell me these great bedtime stories when I couldn't or didn't want to go to sleep at night. So it was all around me, but I always thought that was for somebody else. It wasn't for me. It wasn't in me to do those things. Until about, maybe it's 2004, maybe about 4 years ago. I remember having an idea for a fan fiction story. I'm a huge sci-fi fan, and I've read fan fiction since the X-Files days. And for those who don't know what fan fiction is, it's basically stories that are based on someone else's original text. So X-Files fan fiction would be stories about the X-Files, but maybe sort of spinning off of the story, or maybe taking the X-Files characters and then taking them in a completely different direction and a new story that doesn't have anything to do with this sort of original work. So I've been an X-Files fan for a long time, and I've written some fan fiction for that. But I remember thinking I had an idea for a story, and I kept shutting myself down. The minute I would think, I'd love to write this short story, I just kept telling myself I couldn't do it. I didn't have the time. Our son was, I think, maybe 2 at the time, and I just kept telling myself I couldn't do it. And then finally I woke up January 1st, 2011, and I thought about this story, and immediately started shutting myself down. And I thought, why am I doing that? And I had this hour-long conversation with God about all the times in my life where a door had been opened to me, or someone wanted, had suggested me for some opportunity, and I shut myself down and didn't even consider the opportunity, didn't even try. And as I was lying in bed on New Year's Day, talking to God about this, and I just said, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to stop. So what if I start this fan fiction story and don't finish it? Who's coming over? Who's going to watch and say, Cerece, you didn't do that. Martha Stewart's not coming to my house. Why am I shutting myself down? And I just decided at that point that any door that was open, I would walk through. Even if I wasn't sure, even if I was scared to death, I would walk through that door. And I started writing the fan fiction story, within a day or two. It was a 16-chapter, actually it was a Twilight fan fiction story. And I finished it in 2.5 weeks, and it was pure joy from beginning to end. I loved every single moment of that process. And when I finished, I loved it. I decided to share it on a fan fiction site, and it was, I was surprised. People read it, they understood it, they liked it. And I thought, oh, that's just so great. I had such a great time doing that. Too bad I'm not a writer. I still thought that. And about 6 months later, I was washing the dishes, and the idea for Order of the Seers literally just came to me. And I was so excited because I actually had an original idea of my own. And at that moment, that was a door that was open, and I'd already committed to walking through the doors that were open. And my husband came home from the grocery store. I told him I had a sci-fi story idea, and he was like, what are you talking about? And I told him what it was, and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I think I'm going to try to write it. And at that moment, as I was probably about 4 or 5 chapters into Order of the Seers, I realized, I can do this. I can do this. That's a very long answer, but that's kind of the evolution of how I became a writer and an author.
Right. Now you've started talking about Order of the Seers, how it came about. What was it in your mind the morning when the idea came to you that just, was the initiating point, the thing that made you say, okay, this has to be written? What element in the story do you recall that really was the thing, the focus of, your desire that made you say, okay, I am going to sit down and I'm going to write this?
I think it was the shock and surprise, first of all. I mean, as I was washing the dishes, I saw this man walking towards me in my mind. He had this ash blonde hair and this cataract-like film over his eyes, even though he was a man from Tanzania, a black man from Tanzania. I knew immediately that he was a seer. I knew that he was enslaved for that ability. I knew that there were people all over the world who were suffering the same fate. I knew there was an organization called the Guild that was, imposing their will on these people. This entire story came to me. And I've been a sci-fi fan since 7 years old. My mom took me to see Empire Strikes Back at the Uptown Theater in D.C. And I fell in love with it then. It's a genre that's just hallowed ground for me. So to have a story come to me that powerfully and that sort of wholly, I knew I wouldn't let it go. I mean, it was just kind of the suddenness and the enormity of the story that I loved immediately, and I got immediately. And I just couldn't imagine letting it go. It's just as simple as that. I was just so thrilled to have it. It felt like a blessing.
Okay, now, what process did you go through when deciding to pursue writing as a career? Or do you see yourself as pursuing writing as a career? And if you do, what did you go through mentally? And not just mentally, but, preparedness-wise to decide that I am going to be a writer? Because there are a lot of people who are listening, and they, are like you. They're walking around every day. They have their job. They are thinking about a story, and they are convincing themselves every day not to write it. Finding some reason why it's not going to happen for them. How did you go from? You've given us part of it. How did you go from today? I'm not ready to write to now. Not only am I ready to write, but the second step, I'm ready to share my writing, and then that third step, now I'm ready to market my writing. What was it? What are those steps that you took? If you can share those, that got you from point to point to point to point.
Sure. I've never thought about it that way, but I'm going to try to do that now. First thing was starting to write, and seeing with everything that I wrote that it made sense and that I liked it. I mean, because it's easy to kind of keep it in your head. And a friend of mine, Tri Tickman, who's a wonderful author, said to me when I told her the idea for Order of the Seers, she goes, "Oh, Cerece, you're writing a book." And I said, no, it's just a story. I'm just thinking. And she goes, no, you're writing a book. And I didn't think about it as a book in my head. And I thought about the plot and the story for several months. And I talked to her again. And she said, have you written anything? I said, no, I'm still thinking about it. She said, start writing it down. I said, oh, no, I'm not ready. And she said, just start writing the story outline down. You'd be surprised how much you can get out. And she was right. I hung up the phone. I went up to my office and started writing, and I finished the story outline that night. So the first process is to start writing and get out of your head and stop thinking about it and thinking you're not ready and da-da-da-da, and pick up a pen or get on your laptop and start writing. For me, that process started with the story outline, which is incredibly helpful because I have 2 young children. At that time, I had a full-time job outside the home, so I didn't have a lot of time to be sort of writing and then find out, 5 chapters later that I can't use any of it. I just didn't have that kind of time. So a story outline created a roadmap for me to know where I was going from the beginning. And then from there, I did a chapter outline, and then from there, I wrote the stories. So I did all that, and I started writing. And at my full-time job, things were really shifting in a direction that I wasn't comfortable with. And I remember talking to my husband about it and knowing that I had to leave and really feeling very unsettled. And I talked to him, and I said, well, I need to leave. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And at that time, I was in love with my story. And I said, you know what I really want to do is finish writing this story that I'm writing. At that point, I just wanted to finish. I wasn't even sure if I would try to publish it. I just wanted to finish it. And he said, okay, we'll figure it out. Now, for financially, what that meant for us is figuring out how we could pay our bills, obviously. I was going to do some consulting work that would give me a little more time to write, but still, allow us to pay our bills, etc. And so we kind of moved along in that way. At that point, I was pregnant with my second child, and so there were also a lot of life things that kind of moved to push me into the decision to become an author and a publisher full time. And that really culminated with the birth of our second child and the question of whether we knew I had always wanted to stay at home and work part-time with our child at home, with at least one of us, both of us. So for us, that meant I was going to stay home. And at that point, when I decided that I was going to stay home and we weren't going to put her into daycare, I knew that I was going to publish my book myself, and I knew I was going to form my own publishing company to do that. And so that's kind of how that evolution worked. So I guess the second step is once you start writing, I guess as you see the story evolve and you prove to yourself that you can do it, the second step is deciding how serious you're going to be about it. Mm-hmm. And then depending on how serious you're going to be about it, are you going to share it? How are you going to share it? What does that mean to share it? How are you going to prepare yourself to share it? Then you sort of, what will it take in your life to do what you want to do? You know what I mean? And then you start looking at work and family and life and then shifting things in ways that are feasible and make what you want possible. That makes sense. And that's how that worked for me.
All right. Now, from your discussion, what we've been saying so far, it appears that writing for you is a very enjoyable process. That this is something that, it is soul enriching is what it sounds like. But even in all things that are wonderful and soul enriching, there are parts of those things that are not as enjoyable as others. So if there was a thing in the process that you could avoid doing or having someone else do it or just avoid it entirely,
what would it be?
Yes, the one thing or a couple of things that you think that you would avoid in the writing publishing process if you could.
Marketing.
Okay. Yeah.
I would get somebody to do that. I mean, honestly, deciding when I first, I finished the novel and I realized that it was good enough to try to get published, I sent out about 20 queries to traditional publishers. And the reason why I wanted a traditional publisher was that, first and foremost, I was scared of marketing. I was terrified. I thought that no one would ever read my book if I didn't have a traditional publisher behind me. I thought that I'm a shy writer, and I don't want to have to figure out any marketing at all, so I wanted a traditional publisher to save me from that entire process of figuring out how people discover your book and how people review your book, and I didn't want anything to do with that. And if there's one thing that continually terrifies me, it's the marketing. Because it's not only that you're saying, after you write the book and that's its own reward, but then the marketing is you have to get out there in front of everybody and go, I made this. What do you think? And that's, and at that point you're completely accountable. You get the glory and the blame. And I wasn't interested in any of that. So,
but on that note, and I know you said that you worked full time, and now you're a consultant. In what area do you consult? In what area did you work?
I worked in community and international development. At the time when I started writing Order of the SEERS, I was a director of fundraising for a small nonprofit. And so I did a lot of marketing.
Yeah. But
it wasn't for me.
But do you find yourself drawing on the skills that you had working, directing a nonprofit? Do you find any of those things translating over into how it is that you produce as a writer, as a publisher?
Absolutely. Fundraising and proposal writing is at its core storytelling. And so I find the discipline that I used in developing proposals and doing fundraising definitely helps me as my own publisher now. All the public speaking that I did helps me now, and learning how to get over being afraid of sharing my story and being in front of people has definitely helped me. But at the time I thought it was, as a fundraiser, I was working for a purpose, for a cause that was outside myself, that was bigger than I am and I was, and I never. What I used to tell myself, when I had to present some project, is say, this isn't about me. It's about, fundraising for the 50 kids that are going to get to go to summer camp because of this grant. And once I shifted, my mind, then I could talk about anything. I could do anything because I believed in that project. So now as a publisher, and it's taken me a long time to transition from being a writer and an author to my own publisher. And it's a different brain space. Now what I realize is I'm sort of shifting, and I do that same thing now for myself. This is not about me. This is about this story, which I love a lot and I believe in, and it's about sharing this and helping people discover it. But that process took a long time to shift, in my mind.
All right. Now, the opus that we are looking at from you, I know you have several, but the one that we're looking at right now is your trilogy, Order of SEERS. So if you could, at this time, kind of give us an overview, I guess it's a two-sided overview, one of the story itself, of the three different stories of the trilogy, and also what it was that drove you to write the individual three books. Because I guess I can now ask you before we get into it, but when you started, did you only see yourself writing one book, or was it always a trilogy?
Oh, no, I thought it was just going to be one book. I think I would have been completely freaked out if I thought I was going to write a trilogy. I didn't even know if I could write the first book. No, so I thought it was just one book, one story. And about halfway through writing Order of the SEERS, the first book, I realized that there was a much larger story. So I went back and added to my story outline. But at that point, I was committed. I loved these characters. I felt honored to tell their story, and however long it took, however many books, I was in, and I was going to do it.
Now, the first story of Order of the Seers, who does it focus on?
The first book focuses on, it's kind of an ensemble cast, and really all three books follow the same group of characters throughout. So I wouldn't say that it shifts too much throughout books. The first characters that you meet are Lily and Liam Knight. They're a brother and sister. Lily is a seer, but is mostly unaware of her ability. And Lily and Liam have to face a family tragedy in the first chapter of the book that forces them to go out on their own and have to fend for themselves as young adults. Lily is 13 at the start of the book, and Liam is 16. And he goes from being her big, obnoxious brother to her parent and caretaker. And so the story kind of starts with them, and I hope lets the readers know kind of what are the stakes for being a seer in this world that you're about to enter. And then you meet Marcus Akita and Alessandra Pino, who are seers who have been enslaved by this organization called the Guild and exploited for their ability to see the future. And so you see the other side, sort of Lily and Liam running away from this fate that is chasing them, and Marcus and Alessandra, who are seers who were not able to escape this fate, but find a way to maintain their strength and their individuality within this system that is trying to control and exploit them. So those are the two main sets of characters that you meet in book one, and they come together with other characters to form a powerful coalition of people against this organization known as the Guild. And as they come together, they begin to learn how to fight their fate. So that's getting into the stories. In general, Order of the Seers is a story about a group of people, or seers who are who can see the future and are enslaved for that ability. And the whole trilogy is about how they escape the organization that's trying to exploit them, how they regain their power and fight back. That's kind of the story in general. But in book one, you really follow those two groups and how they come together and then literally change the world.
And book two?
Book two, sort of ending up with book one. Book one is kind of a personal journey of the seers just trying to free themselves from oppression and discover who they are without the definitions and the confinement of the Guild. Book two, at the end of book one, they've done that. They understand their powers and their purpose. Book two, now that it takes you on a journey and sort of explains, now that they understand their purpose, what are they going to do with that? They understand that, number one, they've been given this power of sight and a number of others for a reason, and that it's not just about their own personal freedom as sort of characters. It's about freeing all seers and ultimately about freeing humanity from the oppression of the Guild and what the Guild is actually trying to steal from every person that lives. So that's kind of the mission. Goes from a very individual journey in book one to a global mission in book two.
And book three?
Book three answers the question of why they have their powers. You understand who these people are in book one, what they can do and what their powers are really about in book two. And book three is all about expanding that mission even further, not just to free, but to save the world from a nemesis that has been oppressing them without their knowledge for literally centuries. And so I can't say a whole lot more than that without ruining the book.
Right.
But again, the mission just for the seers and the stakes just get higher with each book as they understand their calling and the real meaning behind why they have these powers at this particular time, at this particular space in the history of this universe, the Order of the Seers.
Right now, at this juncture, and I know you've completed the trilogy, book 3.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to leave them?
Oh, that's such a great question. I cried. Cried like a baby after writing the last chapter. It's hard. It's hard. I miss them terribly, but I feel so good about how the story ended and what their calling was and what they've done, and that I'm mourning them. But to go back would be to dishonor their story. Do you know what I mean? That's how I feel, at least. And so, I'm
sure J.K. Rowling
having a hard
felt
time letting them go. I'm sorry?
I'm sure J.K. Rowling felt that way too.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
But sometimes, you have this story, and sometimes, one day you wake up and you think, there's another story to tell.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. There are certainly possibilities, and I've talked to readers, and there are possibilities for things that happen before Order of the Seers, and there are possibilities for things that come after. But this trilogy, this moment in this story in their lives, it's over with the third book, and I don't have those other stories in my head right now. So if I have them, I will absolutely share them. But right now, I don't. So I'm mourning.
No,
probably I wouldn't be in such mourning if I did have them in my head.
Yeah. All right. Well, as a writer and as a professional,
mm-hmm.
Are there people in your life, whether even intimately, just mentors, or even people that you've never met but only looked at from afar, and decided that this is the path that you want to follow? Are there any people out there in the world, or have been out there in the world, that have kind of shaped the path for you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, as a writer, Octavia Butler. I mean, I remember reading Wild Seed, which is the first book that really blew my mind. I mean, I remember it's the first book that I stopped and then flipped to page 1 and started immediately again. I read scenes over and over and over because I just couldn't believe what she was doing and how she did that. So definitely she's an inspiration as a writer. Just as a person and a professional, my first boss, Robert L. Moore, who ran the Community Development Corporation that was in the neighborhood that I grew up in, who just passed recently, was and continues to be an inspiration for just how I conduct business and how I try to conduct myself with integrity. He was a very tough boss at a time. I was 23 when I started working with him, and man, he was tough. Staff meetings would be brutal, but he was trying to train us for speaking our truth and standing up for what we believed in, and those are lessons that have not left me and continue to serve me well. Certainly for the books, Colin Powell was a huge inspiration for the character Marcus Akita, who is a person who has suffered greatly but still finds a way to inspire people and have compassion for those he loves and even his enemies. And, watching Colin Powell talk about his life, and it definitely inspired sort of the compassion that Marcus Akita, my character, has, was inspired by him. So those are just some of the people. And then my mom, who's an amazing person and a continual example of unconditional love and what that really means in my life. So that's kind of it.
Now, so far, we've heard about your Order of the Seers. Are there any other projects that you have in your mind, or that you're currently working on or will be working on anytime soon?
Absolutely. I have a 2-part space opera that I've already outlined. that I'm looking forward. I've been so excited about this. I actually had a dream about it. And I woke up in the middle of the night and started writing and outlining the story, and it's just been coming to me over the last year. And so I'm really excited to start doing the research for that. I also have a historical adventure that actually is based on a movie idea that I had a long time ago that I was like, gosh, I'd love to see this movie. And then it occurred to me over the summer, I said, why don't I write it? And so I'm really looking forward to that as well, and I think I have a unique spin on it that I'm excited to tell. I have a 5-part children's series that I've outlined, and it's been outlined for at least 3 years, and I've already started writing the first story in the series, but I just haven't had the brain space to finish it. I'm writing a children's adventure with my 6-year-old son because though he's a good reader, he claims he doesn't like to read, but he loves superheroes and swords and skateboards, and so but finding a superhero adventure book that's appropriate for a 6-year-old and then at a 6-year-old reading level is kind of a challenge. So over the summer we started writing one. So I've already outlined it, and he's given me approval for the story. I wrote the first chapter, and he likes it. So I found an illustrator. So I'm really looking forward to doing that and hoping to surprise him with the full book for Christmas. So that's kind of the first project on the immediate front. And then I got an idea for a romance novel because Order of the Seers, my characters are always an impending doom at every possible moment. And while I was doing the final edits for the last seer, I thought, I'd love to write a romance, like something where it's just kind of easy, it's not too complicated. Everybody lives and they're happy in the end. And so I have an idea for romance where these two souls that are trying to find each other through time that I'm looking forward to writing. So those are just a few projects that are in my mind and on the page already.
Fantastic. Now, you grew up, you were saying, when your mom took you to see The Empire Strikes Back, you remember being a fan of the genre, from then, at the very least, from then, maybe earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a writer, how do you, the prism that we see the world through, not just as women, but also as Black women, Black women who grew up in the United States, African American women, through that prism. And I mean, growing up, and I'm going to take away from the story that you're telling out yourself, but I know growing up for myself, there were so very few books, stories, television shows, films that showed people who looked like me, or were who got to be right in the middle of the story, and that's why I started writing when I did write, and people would say, well, you gotta, if you want to be marketable, you're gonna have to put people who look more like the current majority culture in your lead, and if you want it to be successful. But I felt like, well, this is okay for me to be successful. I want people girls who are like me to pick up a book and say, hey, that's just like me, or somebody I know, or somebody I would like to be like, and now, especially now with social media, with small publishing, now the doors have been closed, I think, to us for so long, because everyone always thought we had to go to the big publishers, and they got to be the gatekeepers and got to tell us that, well, nobody's going to read that. But now we find, online, our audience is out there, and they're hungry for, what it is that's being produced. So as a woman of, African descent, I guess Afro-European descent, because we all are here, how do you see yourself as, a prophet, for the genre moving forward from, in the world of diversity? How do you see your role in that?
You know, I see my role as, I guess, putting forth the world as I see it. You know, Order of the Seers has people from Tanzania, people from China, people from Afghanistan, people from it's Italy, people from Oregon, you know, in the U.S. And that's the world that I see. It's very diverse. That's how I grew up. There are a number of different languages in Order of the Seers. You know, there's everything from Farsi to Swahili, and yeah, I hope that it's presented in a way that's normal, because it actually is normal. So I think one of the most valuable things about women writers, authors of color, is that we put forth a world that is not unique, but that is incredibly normal to us. And as we share that world with others, they see that, oh, yeah, this is normal too. There's nothing strange about this. And so I guess I see my role as just kind of putting that forth, if that answers your question. Yeah, I think putting the way I see it into the world.
I know, I saw where you had attended, I went to your site, attended the convention, so do you regularly, the Comic-Con, so do you regularly attend conventions or events and do meet and greets? And if so, where do you go? And if you could tell us about your experiences, that would be great.
Sure. You know, and piggybacking on your last question, I am currently at New York Comic-Con. I just finished up day 2. And this is my 3rd year at New York Comic-Con, and I do a lot of science fiction conventions. And as a Black woman, it is so important to be there, and I'm so excited to be there. Because what I've found is that, you know, contrary to conventional wisdom, people are looking for the stories that we are telling. They're excited that I'm there, and not just Black people, although Black people are really excited to see me, and I'm excited to be there and be seen by them. But everybody's excited. They're looking for something new and something different. And that's definitely one thing that I love to encourage authors, and particularly authors of color, to do is start attending these sci-fi conventions. Because one of the things I get over and over again is somebody walks up to me, sometimes Black, sometimes not. I walk to them, oh my gosh, you're a female sci-fi writer. You're a Black female sci-fi writer. I didn't think there was anybody but Octavia Butler. And, you know, I started carrying a list, literally, because I just got like, no, we're out there. There's this person, there's that person. And they're like, well, I never see them. Well, where are they? And we're not there. We're not there. At New York Comic-Con this year, well, let me talk about my first year. 2012, I was the only female of any race selling a sci-fi novel that I had written.
You got to be kidding.
I am not kidding. Don't even get me started. I am not kidding at all. 2013 I went, and there was a huge improvement. There was one other woman, a white woman, who was right next to me selling a sci-fi novel that she had written, and then across from me there was a Black woman from London selling a comic book called Afro Ella that she had written. That was it. In the entire New York Comic-Con last year was 133,000 people. If you're a sci-fi author, creator, this is the sweet spot. It literally doesn't get any sweeter. It's 4 days of 133,000 geeks, just like you, looking for something that they can't find at Barnes & Noble. Okay, so they're not looking for what they say is popular or what they say will sell. They're looking for the indie. They're looking for the unique. They're looking for the singular, different voice that they haven't heard from before. That is us. Hello? And we're not there. We're not there at all, at least in terms of novels. This year at Small Press, there are 3 women again, just 3. It's me and 2 white women selling novels that they wrote, and that is it. And it's just shocking. I mean, it's gotten to the point where one of the salespeople at New York Comic Con actually asked me to talk to other women who are considering exhibiting at New York Comic Con, because he's like, can you just please, talk to them and tell them that it'll go well, and it'll, that's where we are right now. I mean, it's just really, really sad and so disturbing, because every single year the reception for me personally in my books has been tremendous. I was told my first year that I wouldn't make any money and that I wouldn't break even, and I did. As an African American female author of sci-fi with one book, and really, that book had been out for like 3 weeks. New York Comic Con was my first convention, and I had very little idea what I was doing. And people were just so welcoming and excited. Now, in terms of comics, we've got better representation from African American men. They're representing, and they're doing a great job, and it's exciting to see them. And I think they're being well received, and people are excited that they're there. But in terms of African American women, in terms of African American men in novels, yeah, we're not there. We're not there. And so I have the list. I have the list that I give out. Hey, here, and it's called Other Authors of Color Who Write Speculative Fiction Besides Me. because that's what I keep getting asked. Besides, who is there? And I start, and again, it's not just white people who want, or black people who want to know. It's white people who want to know. It's Asian people who want to know. It's Latino people who want to know. And we're not there. So I just start listing them. I just start listing folks. Indie authors, traditionally published. I don't really care. They don't really care. They just want a good story, and they want you to give them a good pitch and a chance to discover their book.
Cool.
I preach it all the time. I go to Baltimore Comic Con. I just went to C2E2 in Chicago. Fantastic. It was the first Comic Con that I actually sold out of my books. Never been there before. I went to Austin Con in D.C. Yay! I was so excited to have a con in my hometown, and that was a wonderful experience. I sold out there as well. Let's see. I'm hoping to do Dragon Con next year, but I haven't been there yet. I'm blanking out. I've done Wizard Con in Philly. So those are some of the Comic Cons that I've done. I went to the National Book Club conference. Again, an amazing opportunity, an event in Atlanta that's run every year. I met book clubs who had been together for over 20 years. They literally put kids through college together. You know what I mean? And I was the only African-American woman sci-fi writer there. And there was Brandon Massey, who was doing his thing, and that was it. That was it. And there were book clubs looking for speculative fiction writers, and we weren't there. So I know this is probably I'm off your topic, but like I told you, you should stop me. No, because I'm very passionate about this. One of the great things about being an indie author is that you don't have to listen to the conventional wisdom about who wants your book and who's going to read your book. I'll give you an example. At the National Book Club Conference, there are primarily African-American book clubs that have been around, the new ones that are just starting and trying to figure out what they're doing, and as I said, book clubs that have been around for 20 years or more. The conventional wisdom is that black people don't read sci-fi, which, of course, this whole show disproves, and they certainly don't write it. The reception that I got there was incredible. Older women, younger women, just looking for something different. These are avid readers. We should be there. Oh, I forgot. There was one other gentleman, I'm forgetting his name, I think it's Forsyth, who had a Sword and Soul novel that was awesome. Yes, he was there as well. That was it. Again, there's just the conventional wisdom is that, people who are not Black are not going to be interested in a Black sci-fi author. Again, not true.
Well, I know last year I went to was Arkansas, the pulp arc, and of course regarding pulp fiction, and that was one of the issues that we talked about. That why is it an important issue to deal with diversity in the pulp genre? And it's because, like you said, that you can only tell the same story so many times before people get bored with it. Yeah. And it may be the same story, but when you see it through our prism, when you see it through our filter, it's a different story. Something you didn't even consider why a person would do the thing that they did, or why, when, in the story that you see all the time when, the hero, gets on the edge of the cliff and he jumps, why, in this story through our prism, no, I wouldn't jump. After I turn and I climb down, I get a rope and I climb. I'm not jumping off that cliff, I'm not projecting that I'm going to land. I'm going to be very careful about this, or I may just jump. Who knows? Yeah. But that's the thing. You don't know, because you don't know what it is that my background, as a person of color, as a woman, has prepared me. How it has prepared me to answer those questions through my characters and my story. Because basically that's what it is. That we are answering questions, we are solving puzzles and mysteries, but with the tools that we had to develop to navigate the world being who it is that we are.
Absolutely. And people want those stories. They are bored. They are bored with the regular story. And one of the reasons why the Comic-Cons are so important is, again, because you don't have to search for these people. They're all in one place for like 2, 3, 4 days. You know what I mean? And it's hard to find them online and this, that, and the other, and did you catch their attention and blah, blah, blah. But literally they pay and come to see you and what you're doing in a different story.
Why did you decide, okay, this 3 years ago, I'm going to New York Comic Con. What was it that made you say, okay, it's Wednesday. I just woke up and I'm going to New York Comic Con. What was it that made
Honestly, this is not a good answer. Complete naivete. I had no idea what it was going to be like. When I told people, I'm going to New York Comic Con, that's going to be my first show, people looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, well, I bought the booth already. So, to know me personally is to realize just how much of my life can be summed up in that kind of way. But I just thought, well, I need to market this book. I don't get the internet and social media at all. I like talking to people one-on-one. So convention made sense to me. It's like I go, hi, how are you? This is my book. And, that I could get my mind around that, talking to somebody. How to do marketing in a tweet, continues to elude me. It's a concept. But so I figured I understood it, and I just thought, well, I don't even know if I knew how big it was, honestly. I think I try to keep myself ignorant in certain ways so that I won't psych myself out. I just kind of do it. I get the booth, and I'll just figure it out as I go along. And that helps manage my freak out a lot. And so it's just naivete, really. And I just thought, and when I told certain people, I wrote a sci-fi book, they said, are you going to San Diego Comic-Con? I thought, well, no, I can't, how can I get the plane fare? And, logistically, with 2 babies, that just seemed like that was just not, and, a husband and schedules, that was not going to happen. So I thought, well, I can drive to New York.
Yeah.
And that's all right. Yeah, how hard can that be? And, so I think it was at least 60% cluelessness. But also, I thought, well, this is easier because these are all self-identified sci-fi people. So I don't have to be embarrassed by pitching to pitch to them because, they only like romance, or, they only like these are people who said, I want to hear about sci-fi. And so it seemed easier in a way to me. And then I went to a small sci-fi convention called Shore Leave, which is just outside of Baltimore. And I went on a Thursday or Friday morning, I can't remember, and there was nobody there but the exhibitors, which is exactly what I wanted. And I went around and asked them to give me advice on setting up, on what they thought I should do. These are the people who first let me know that I was crazy for New York Comic Con to be my first show. I was like, again, I already paid for the booth, so I have to go. And so they said, well, do this and do that and do that. And my best friend, who is not really a sci-fi fan, went with me just because she wanted to laugh at me, you know, kind of geeking out about Star Trek and this, that, and the other, and talk about me later. Went with me, and after a couple hours of interviewing different exhibitors, I went to lunch with my friend, and we outlined what we sketched out what my booth would look like, what kind of supplies I would need, and everything. And those incredibly generous exhibitors at Shirley, that tiny sci-fi convention, were the reason why I was fully prepared for New York Comic Con. So, and it's one of the reasons why I post, you know, what my experience was on Comic Con, how many books I sold, what it cost me, this, that, and the other, because those folks were so, I could not have done it without them. And when I went to New York Comic Con and people saw my booth and what I was doing, they were like, how many conventions have you done? I was like, this is my first. And they're like, how did you do that? And I said, all the exhibitors at Shirley told me what to do. And when I don't know what I'm doing, if you're willing to tell me what to do, I do what you say. So I'm humble enough to know that I need to listen. So that was just, you know, yes, that it's 60% just okay. And then the rest was just trying to do some research with some people I figured could teach me something. And the reception was just incredible. Not only did I make my booth and my booth fee back at that first New York Comic Con, and the booth fee was like $950, I think, at the time. You know, I actually made a tiny profit. And everybody told me, don't expect that. You're a first-time author, you know, you're black, you're female, like, good luck with that. And so, but that's the great thing about being an indie author. You can be where nobody thinks you should be. You can do whatever you want. And if it succeeds, great. If it fails, you can cross that off the list of the million things you need to try to figure out how to discover and, you know, your audience. And so I just encourage us as authors, as female authors, as black authors, to just go out there and try stuff. Don't listen to people. Find out for yourself. They might be right, but then, you know, find out for yourself, particularly when it comes to finding your audience. You know what I mean? Because if you've got a story, and that's something my friend Tri Sickman told me, you know, back when I was just trying to write the first book and I was scared to death that I couldn't write and couldn't finish and blah, 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 blah. She said, Cerece, and then when I finished, I was even more scared to death. She said, you've got to believe in your story. And I think through all my fear and everything, I think it's the single best piece of advice I've ever gotten. Because that's how you get over your fear. That's how you push forward. That's how you keep going. You know, it really, because when I think about myself, I just get freaked out. When I think about my characters and about this story, it gives me courage. Courage to try things that I'm usually very uncomfortable to do.
All right. I guess right now, I get to pause for a moment for station identification.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, which is sponsored by the Black Science Fiction Society. This evening we have with us writer, publisher, Cerece Rennie Murphy, and who's talking about her trilogy of books, Order of the SEERS, as well as her experiences as a writer, her experiences as a conventioneer, and this is a, you know, all-around talented person who decided, you know, one day that they were going to move forward with their concept they had in their brain and bring it to life. And she's continuing to do that, bringing her ideas, her stories to life. I know we're like, I guess, one hour into the show, and I know we have another hour in, and I don't know exactly how it is that you are going to want to move into the second hour. Mm-hmm. But I do have a few more questions, you know, before we start going down into the chat room and doing Q&A. But
sure.
I'll finish up the few questions I have left, and then if anyone in the chat room, anyone who's listening, has any questions, if you can go ahead and start posting those, and then I can go in and start asking, and Cerece can then, give you her answers. So
Sure.
start doing that while you all in the chat room doing that while I'm finishing up with this. And I guess my next question, in this, the one of the big issues is, when you decided to do this, did you experience any resistance from anyone, any negativity when you said, okay, I'm this professional, I'm out in the world doing the things that your mom gets to go out and brag to her friends about, and now I'm going to be a writer, and we're all going to starve. So, so when you did that, did you get any resistance, any negativity? And if you did, how did you approach it? How did you deflect it, if you did?
Okay, this is going to be a little convoluted answer, so I want to prepare you. From my immediate family and friends, no. But the big thing about, so now I'm going to be a writer and we're going to starve, because I want to talk about that for a minute, because it sort of gets to preparation for doing what you want to do in life in general. I started out doing social work, and I always knew my goal was always to be financially independent, which is not necessarily wealthy, but just the ability to do what I wanted to do and not do what I didn't want to do. And I always knew that social work would not allow me to be independent. So pretty early on, I started investing in real estate because I knew that, if I wanted to just have the freedom to be able to, do the things that I wanted to do. And so that early preparation, those early things really helped my husband and I figure out financially how we were going to not starve while I was pursuing whatever I wanted to do. And I think that's important. I want to, put that out there because, and it's not just like, oh, yeah, and money wasn't an issue, and we just did whatever. It wasn't like that at all. It took years and years of, sort of financial preparation to be at the point where I could then say, what I want to do is write that book, and then for us to look at our financial resources and be able to then pull that off. So I want to just put that out there, and so for folks. So as I said, as far as my immediate family, no, everybody was supportive. They're used to me just kind of doing a whole bunch of different things. And my husband was incredibly supportive because, I remember texting him at 3 a.m, telling him what I really want to do is leave my job and write this story. And he wrote back, let's come home, we'll figure it out. And I loved him so much in that moment. I really did. Mm-hmm. But in terms of negativity, where it came for me is when I decided that I was going to publish the story. Because when I finished the first draft of Order of the Seers, I posted it as a fan fiction story on the same site that I had posted my first short story, mainly because I could not imagine trying to publish a book that had not been vetted by somebody besides myself. And fan fiction was really the community that made me feel like I maybe could do this, particularly after the reception from my first short story. And the reception was wonderful. But when I decided that I was going to take that story down from the fan fiction site and publish it, oh, boy. I found out the power of social media to be negative. I got my Twitter account, and someone called me a thief because there's this whole sort of, I guess, idea within fan fiction that if you post something as fan fiction, you can't then take it down and publish it. Now, typically, fan fiction story is based on some other work, but I had posted my original work as fan fiction. But those people felt like, well, mostly people who had not read the story. but just were objecting in concept, because the people who read the story completely understood from the first chapter. They're like, this is not fan fiction. This is very different from what you usually see in this, that, and the other. I'm like, I'm just sharing a story. But those people who had not read this story felt like I was, stealing some other original idea, and then begin to post negative comments on Goodreads. Someone called me a thief on Twitter, and it was, man, it was brutal. But it was a wonderful learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. That's an interesting concept, because I remember years back, I used to write fan fiction, where yours was X-Files, mine was Witchblade. And when I was writing, and it was fun, and you get into it with other people, and then I read an article from someone, I think I've said this before on BSFS. The article was saying, don't write fan fiction, because it doesn't belong to you. The characters are not yours. If you see a character and you like that character, find out what it is about that character that is so compelling to you. And then whatever it is compelling to you about that character, to create your own character, because you have these wonderful stories, these great plots, and these wonderful worlds that you're creating, but you're creating them for a world that you can never sell, because the original characters, upon which it's based, don't belong to you. I never wrote another fan fiction after I read that article.
Yeah.
I never wrote another one, because I realized the person was absolutely right. Great, and I can write these wonderful stories, but those stories are always in someone else's world. And unless, you can, get to the Star Trek universe, will allow you basically to write fan fiction, but they will publish it. But if you, but you basically have the rules of what characters you're not allowed to write about, and, story, bloodlines and stuff you're not allowed to write about. But in reality, you write fan fiction. You're writing in somebody else. You're playing in someone else's playground, and they've got all the equipment. And if they tell you, get out of my playground and go home, well, guess what? You got to get out of the playground and go home.
No, absolutely. And but the thing about it was, I kind of did it backwards. I wrote an original story and then posted it as fan fiction, and people just thought they thought what.
That somehow was part of that universe.
Yeah.
Well, no, but this was your own personal universe that you just shared with them. But somehow they claimed ownership over the thing that you created.
Absolutely.
And that's a hard thing for people to understand. And no, but even if it's a fan fiction, they have to understand.
Exactly. But the thing is, people don't usually
these are your characters,
Yeah.
But even the fantasy, yours are, and even you could change the name of the character and put them somewhere else completely different, and it's still yours. It doesn't belong to that universe.
Absolutely. But people who read this story understood that. People who didn't read the story but then heard that I was going to publish it and had, a philosophical difference, then started really, posting on Goodreads and, playing me on Twitter, and it was really, really hard, because I wasn't familiar with social media. I wasn't, I had no idea. I didn't even know they'd done it until somebody taught me how you find tweets that are about you. And I had to give a tutorial on that. Because someone mentioned something to me, I was like, I didn't see that. And they're like, Cerece, get a clue. Come on, you're going to be an author. You got to get this stuff together. And it was within the first week of me opening my Twitter account. And it really hurt a lot. And it played right into my fear that, who do you think you are? You shouldn't be doing this. Nobody's really going to read your stuff. These people have already gone before you and sullied your name in the universe and blah, blah, blah. And all the kind of stuff that will, keep you in bed all day if you let it.
Yeah.
But then I had to decide, who do you believe is more powerful? Who do you believe? You're given this story, this blessing. Do you think that these people are more powerful than you are, than the destiny of this story? Who controls your destiny? Is it this person who hasn't read your story and has an opinion based on nothing but their philosophical difference? Or do you believe that this has a life of its own? And do you have the courage to pursue that? And I had to answer that question pretty early. And it was wonderful. I hated it at the time. It was so painful because those things weren't true. But I learned how to just ignore unfounded criticism, take what you can from constructive criticism. I learned that you don't respond to negative reviews. I learned that everybody has a right to their opinion, but you still have to do what you have to do. You still have to move forward. You can't stop because somebody else said something and this, that, and the other. And it was a wonderful lesson to learn so early. So that was the negativity that I experienced. And when I, got up from feeling sorry for myself and feeling really hurt, I just decided that I believed in my story. And if I was ever going to prove... Mm-hmm.
There's a question in the chat room, and it is, when you write, what is your method? 1 hour or 2? Or whatever your method happens to be.
Okay. I try to write I don't have an hour sort of limit. I have a chapter. I go chapter by chapter. Usually it takes me about a week to write a chapter. But what I learned with the last year is that if I write by hand, I can write a lot faster. It flows from my brain better. And so I try to set a time, and my goal is not an hour or 2 hours. It's a chapter or half a chapter, whatever I think I can get done in that day. But at the end of the week, I want that chapter written, and I want the first round of editing, which I do myself, done before I move on.
And who does your editing, your final cleanup? Is it friends, or do you have a professional editor? How do you manage with the editing?
That's been a process that's evolved. I have 3 editors now. My first round editing is kind of done by me. All right, does this say what I want to say? This, that, and the other. Then I turn it over to a really incredible friend of mine who usually has the story outline and the chapter outline. So she knows what I'm trying to accomplish with that chapter and then can judge. I mean, she's great with grammar and stuff as well, but she really has a critical eye for detail and sort of concepts. So then she says, well, A, did you do what you said you wanted to do with this chapter? Does this chapter make sense? Is he, wearing a black hat at 2 o'clock and then 3 you have him in a skull cap, and that doesn't make any sense. She does that kind of level editing. And then I turn it over to another editor for more detailed sort of copy editing, grammar and sentence structure, and then a final proofreader to polish it. And that's I started out with 1 editor, and now I have 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
So.
And I found that
does that process work for you?
Yeah, it works for me. It works for me because I just realized as I've published each book that, and I have great editors, but when you think of, traditional publishing houses have, 5 different people reading your book. And, everybody's looking for something different. And so, I don't have 5 people, but I realize that different people have different skills. And I've needed all of that in order to produce the level of book that I wanted to. But, you could find one person who maybe can do all of those things. But for me, I've found that I'm really happy with the editors that I have now. And I feel like I can produce something when I look it over 3 months later. I think, yeah, this is where it needs to be. So.
And now, have you found that since the beginning of your career, your writing career, that you started to accumulate a fan base? And do you have any groupies?
Yeah. Yes, I have. It's such a great surprise. It's such a great surprise. Yeah. It's really cool. It's amazing.
So where do you find that your fan base comes from? I mean, is it all over the diverse? Is it more women, more men? Is it more people of color? Is it, not people of color? How does the, if you threw it all out on the bell curve, how's it coming out?
I would say it's kind of maybe 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. I have a great base of African American fans. I have a great base of, I would say, non-white fans who are not necessarily African American, or maybe mixed in there with African American. And then I have a great fan base that is white. In terms of gender, to my surprise, I'd say it splits almost evenly. Slightly more women, but not a lot, which, people find funny. They're like, oh, you're a woman, it must be all women who read your books, and that's not at all true. And, as sci-fi is considered, a white male-dominated, I guess to some extent, in some realms it is. But, no, I mean, there are so many women who read sci-fi.
Yes.
And it's just been a joy to have, to get to meet them and to relate to them and feel like my stories are resonating with them in a way, that makes them excited about what I'm doing. So I'd say it's about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, so now as you are, finishing, you finished the trilogy, the next work that, just right now, the next one that you are thinking about pushing out, which one is that?
The book with my son. The book written for my son.
Okay.
And that should be out in Christmas. So, but that's, and I am planning to publish it. He's going to be an author. Yeah, I mean, he's helped me write it. No, my son has been waiting all summer, and because the last year, the final book took so long for me to finish, and my son has been so patient. So I've got to finish that book for that boy. that is what is going to happen.
So that's your Christmas project is that you're going to have this book out and ready for the holidays.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
So then this is the book that you are telling all of us here that we should be waiting on to put on the list for our
Lord,
our
I just realized that. You set me up. Yes. Well, I'm hoping to do some pretty unique things with it. I want to, because it's really an experiment. I mean, because my son just, he started second grade, and I'm hearing a lot from parents of boys, young boys, that, again, their boys are reading, but they're not loving what they're reading, so they don't like reading. They want to read, superheroes and stuff like that, but the books that talk about that aren't really appropriate for a 6-year-old. Like, we need like a cool book, but for a really young boy. And so one of the things I'd like to do is share it. Just share it and ask people to read it to your son and see whether or not it works. Because I've never written a children's book. It's all a big experiment, to see whether or not my son will get it, but maybe will your son get it? Will his son get it? And see how I can tweak it. So by Christmas, I want something that I can share and see if you can read to your child and they'll be excited. And first of all, they can read it with you or they can read it on their own, and that they'll like it and get it, and it'll still be as cool as that superhero, cartoon that they're watching. So I'm not exactly sure how I want to do that. I know that Kindle has a new, children's book thing, but I really want to get it out and just have people just give me feedback on whether or not this works with your child, with your son or your daughter in that age range, with that reading level. So, yes.
Well, one thing we've got to admit, like here with BSFS, with this, group of, of writers of all stripes, for science fiction, fantasy, horror, all the, the superhero genre, subgenre, that, you've got, right here, the audience, or, an audience that will, exactly, that will get you through that process. So this is the place.
Yeah, so at Christmas, folks, help me read it to your daughter or your son. No, I'm planning to make the book free. So just because I really just want people, I just really want to tweak it and make sure that it works. And then,
if it does, then you certainly have the foundation for either a foundation or for a series or a template for doing it with other characters.
Exactly. But really, at first with this book, I just want I just want to get our boys reading stuff they're excited about, and our little girls reading stuff that they're excited about. You know, even though, you know, they're 6 years old or 7 years old and, you know, aren't reading Chaucer, you know, and Pellegrino Tade, you know, or whatever. So, yeah, I thank you. I'd love some help. So, yes, so now I've said it. Lord have mercy. I can go with finishing this book and getting it out so people can tell me whether or not it's working or not.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. Now,
that's
at the very beginning, we started talking, and you indicated that to go to the Comic-Con in New York, you know, you had to jump in the vehicle and head on up the road. And you, you know, also indicating to Philadelphia. You know, of course, you know, you've been like the Baltimore, D.C. area. And so I had a question, you know, do you travel? You know, that's my basic question. And do you travel? If you do you enjoy it? And is there anywhere that you believe feels like home to you when you're there? So as far as your traveling as an author and getting out in the world and talking with people, what places feel like home to you?
I would say New York Comic-Con has probably been my favorite. You know, New York is just an interesting place. I was on the train, the A train this morning, going down to New York and going down the Javits Center in downtown New York, and it's just watching everybody together. And I just love that. You know, no matter what, you know, no matter who you are, what economic class you are.
Absolutely. Like, New York is fantastic.
People ride the train.
Rich people ride the train. Everybody rides the train.
Everybody rides the train. And D.C. used to be like that. I don't, you know, I feel like it's moving away from that. And it's to some extent, it's always been a segregated city, but it feels like, you know, it's just losing
even more so now.
And I was, even more so now in some ways. And I was on the train and I just thought, God, I love this. And the train announcer is talking about, you know what, if there's someone, you know, who's pregnant or elderly or disabled, you know, please get up and do the right thing. You know, if you give your seat up and you're going to stand for the right cause. And, you know, everybody be safe today. And there was just this sense of community on this train this morning. I was like, that's how I know I'm moving back to the city. You know, I just dig this. I love this sense of we are all in this train together, and we better figure out a way to get along, keep each other safe, and get to where we need to go.
Absolutely.
And I just loved that. And New York is where I learned that I could do this. All the conventions about me as a woman, as a black woman, as a new sci-fi writer, New York Comic-Con and New York City busted that wide open for me.
Wow. And
now
you have a question. You do have a question in the room, the chat room. And it's a question for the guest, and it says, this is your husband and kids. We love you.
Hey, babe.
But there's a real question. And these artists usually have a song that resonates with them. Was there a scene that resonated with you, and why did it resonate?
Ooh, was there a scene in my books?
I guess, yes, that would be it.
That resonated with me. Okay. Without giving anything away, in the last year, one of the final chapters of the book, there's a song in the scene. It's called Unfinished Sympathy. And now the group it's a house song. It's a very old one that comes to mind. And the SEERS are rushing off to do something that is very, very dangerous. And in that moment where they really don't know what is going to happen, their life is so uncertain, they decide to give over to that uncertainty and just revel in the moment of their lives. And they're racing in the night. It's pitch black. Some are on motorcycles. Some are on like an open Jeeps, those open Jeep Wranglers. And they start blasting this song, Unfinished Sympathy, by Massive Attack. There it is. And they just start dancing. They just start dancing and just grooving to this song and just realizing that your life really is this moment. And you have to enjoy that. We don't know. We know what happened, and what happened is gone. And we're rushing towards something that literally, I mean, these seers, they know the future, but, you know, to know the future and to live the future for these characters is something completely different because they're human. You know what I mean? And so even though you know what's going to happen, when you feel it happening, it's just a completely different experience. And they give over to that. And I love that scene. There's so much courage, there's so much strength, and there's so much humility as these people just dance what may be the last dance of their lives. And they just groove to this song as they're driving. And I loved it. I saw that scene for a year. And when I wrote it, I played that song over and over in my yeah, and it made me cry, it made me smile, it made me so proud of them, and it made me want to be that brave. I love that scene.
Fantastic. So, now the other question, and
can I just say something else? Shout out to my husband who is home watching our two kids. I've been gone since Tuesday night. I love you, babe. Anyway, Sequoia Murphy. Woohoo. Anyway, go ahead. Yes.
Well, my question was that I found, you know, and when I'm writing, sometimes it gets to the point where I stop writing and I find them chronicling. You know, that it's like I'm just watching it unfold and just taking it down. Just because you get to the point sometimes where you say, okay, and I've decided in the story that this is going to happen, and your character says, no. No, that's not happening. It's like, no.
Oh, yeah.
They become so well developed that a thing that you created for them to do, that is, oh, no, I'm not doing that. It's like, oh, no, that's, no. So you're going to have to change that because I'm self-realized now, self-actualized, and now I have to do this other thing. And you say, yeah, you know, now I feel like I'm just, you know, I just started them out, give birth to them, and then they just go their own way, and all you're trying to do is keep up.
Oh, yes. That's exactly how it is for me. No, my characters tell me what to do. See, every time I think of how, you know, I'm come to a pivotal scene and I'm trying to work it out, and I come up with something, invariably it sucks. I mean, it's just terrible. But see, when I shut up and I listen to what, and I watch and I wait for my characters to tell me what happens, then it's awesome.
Exactly.
And I'm along for the ride.
Yes.
I can't wait. I remember, I was like, I can't wait to finish this last book because I can't wait to see what happens. Like, I'm part of the audience. And then it's so, oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's the best space. That's the best because they know. They got it. And for me, yeah, when I get in there and I'm like, oh, well, maybe this could, they're like, yeah, back it up. And it never works. I can't get half the page. It all sucks. Now I've got to delete it and start over. I've got to pick up my son in 30 minutes, and now I've wasted an hour. I'm mad. They're mad. Yeah. So I just gotta shut up and just let them. They know, and they're speaking to me. Yes, I remember there was a scene in the first book. There's a love scene. And I'm thinking, Sandra's not ready for it. I'm asking her. And you talk to your characters too, right? Do you talk to them? Oh, and ask her. All the time, right? Okay, I'm not that crazy.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I'm like, Sandra, are you sure you're ready? You know, so much has happened. And I was trying to write another scene, and she just literally said to me, okay, this is what I'm doing. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm about to do this right now. And I was like, okay, I'm going to delete. We go back. We'll do what you said. And it's exactly right for her because she knows what she's doing, and it's my job to write it down. It's my job to express, I feel like, what I see in my head and what I hear the best way that I can so that and for success for me in writing is when I read over the scene and it's exactly what I saw in my head. Yeah. And it starts getting funky when I read it and it's like, oh, no, like I'm not seeing that picture. Okay, I messed up. You know, that's really what it is for me as well. Yeah, the chronicling. Yeah, and getting out of the way of the story.
Yeah, and also so Tyrone is in the chat room, and he's saying the same thing. He said, my characters have done that to me before, and it is, it's not crazy, but when you have your character, and they are so real to you, and you know their strengths, and you know their weaknesses, and you know what they like, what they dislike, and sometimes, we have the plot, and we know, okay, this is what's going to happen, and then you hit that brick wall because you say, no, because this character would never do that. This person, and it's not this character, this person, because it's a real person now. This person,
they live. They live. Yeah.
And then you know that you're not being true to this person by trying to make them do something that is so tortuous and is so convoluted. And you just have to say, no, this character would not do that. This character would do this a different way. This person, this person is not kind. This person would not react that way. This person is sarcastic. This person would say something at this moment, this poignant moment. This person would say something highly inappropriate. So let them live their life. let them live their life and say the inappropriate thing.
That's a great way to put it. Let them live their lives. Yeah, I'm going to remember that. Thank you. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, you got to do that because otherwise I find, the truth is distilled when you start messing with it, the truth of the story, the truth of the characters. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to do that because then it's not going to resonate. So not distilled, I mean diluted. Yeah, the truth is diluted when you start to do that. And you can feel it. You read over that scene and you're like,
you've grown and you're like, and you edit it
it sucks. yeah. Oh, my idea was not so great after all. Yeah, you don't want to do that because I believe the truth is trying to find its home in somebody else. And that's what connects a reader to a book. That's what connects me to a book. When I read that scene, it goes, in my chest. That is the truth that the story is trying to reach. And if you get in the way, no matter how ugly or uncomfortable, and I remember I read Stephen King's On Writing, and, he talks about just discovering the story and having the courage to unearth the story, almost like an archaeologist. And so when you're successful.
Like Michelangelo, remember?
Yes.
Michelangelo, he releases the figure from the marble. He's not. Yeah, he's not carving it. He's releasing what's already there.
Exactly. And when you do it well, the story emerges intact. And when you don't do it well, it kind of looks like an arm, but it's not really. You know what I mean? And that's how you know. And then you're back to the drawing board. You know what I mean?
And you're taking those 4 last chapters that you forced, and you're crying because now all the time that you put into it, it's garbage. I mean, believe me, I have done this. And I took a long time rewriting the beginning of something, and it didn't work. I kept trying to push through. It did not work, and then I had to stop and say, okay, take it apart. I mean, it was so painful, but you said, I can't keep trying to make this go this direction. It's not going. It doesn't work. It's not right, and I've got to. I keep, it's like, well, if I do this, then maybe I can fix it. There is no fix. And that's the hardest thing. You get to the point where you've got to realize there is no fix, and you've got to go away 3 months, 4 months, 6 months worth of writing because it doesn't work.
Oh,
it's painful,
awful.
But in the same breath, also probably the most liberating thing I have ever done.
Yeah, I believe that. Scary though.
Yes, but that moment when you just say, okay, I'm going to stop kidding myself. This is not working. Like you say, I'm not being true to the story. I'm not being true to the persons that I've created to tell this story. So I've got to be true to them. You said be true to, like you said, your story. You've got to believe in your story. And I've got to just trash it all and start where it's clean.
Absolutely. Well, for me, my characters, because they're very, very bossy. I mean, from the beginning, just so bossy. Like, literally, I would not be able to move. And I tried to, I'd write a chapter and it wasn't quite, but it was close. But all right, I'm trying to get this finished. So I'm trying to move on to the second character or the second chapter. Then I can't. It's not working. I keep thinking about what's not working in the previous chapter, and so I then have to go back. I mean, I've spent a month and a half writing 20 pages.
Yeah,
20. It was excruciating. I mean, just like. And every, insecurity and every emotion is going on. Like, I'm stuck. I just can't write it. I can't do it. But I knew I couldn't move on because I had learned, from trying to do that previously, that I just won't get anything done. I mean, my brain doesn't work that way, and the characters the story did not want to emerge that way because it's building on itself. And I needed to take the time to think it through. And just because I was impatient was not the story's problem. And they were not about to give me any, leeway. They needed me to get on their schedule. And, it just literally would shut me down. It would shut me down until I gave over, like you said, and surrendered, and then finally got it right.
And here it comes. Now, there is a question here that says, in your opinion, was the New York Comic Con expensive and or inexpensive, making it accessible to the small indie creator?
In my opinion, does New York Comic Con make it accessible for the indie creator? Is that the truth? Is that?
Yes, I guess based on the $950 expense for the booth.
Oh. It's steep. No, and it's very, very. It's a lot of money. I mean, there's no way around it. And would it be better if it was cheaper? Sure. And if that's not accessible for you, then don't do New York Comic Con. But you can do something that's cheaper and maybe local, and maybe. I mean, there are always alternatives. I do Awesome Con, and that's $275 for the booth. And I do New York Comic Con because that's, $900, even though that's $975. But here's what I think about that, and there's no other venue for me to reach 133,000 sci-fi fans, and I am paying for that access. Is it cost prohibitive? Hell yeah. Do I want my book to get the best chance that it can? Absolutely. Will I have to save up all year for that? You bet. And it may be that you have to save up for 2 years for it. They're not this year, miraculously, because it used to be you'd pay $950, $975, and then you'd have to rent your own table, which was $100, and chairs, and which was even more money, and I don't know because I just refused to pay for more than a table. And then you had to get yourself there and everything else. This year, they actually provided tables and a chair. And I was like, oh, I couldn't even believe it. So that's a little help. That saves you $100, but you still have to come up with the rest. Do I think it's worth it for an indie author to do it? Yes. I absolutely do. Because I'll tell you what, the first year, like I said, I made a profit, but it was maybe like $100 or $200. We're not talking a lot of money here. I got 2 or 3 impromptu interviews. The context that I met, I still use today and have been significant in moving my career forward. In addition to exposing myself to a base of readers that I don't know how I would have accessed any other way. So I guess the question is, are you going to make money and is this expensive? Yes, it is going to be expensive and you might not make money, but you will access readers, resources, bloggers, interviewers, media contacts, book clubs, that you might not access otherwise. And that is worth investing in, whether you do it at New York Comic Con or some other place, and then build up to New York Comic Con. Because right now, for small press, it's first come, first serve. And in Artist Alley and other places, you have to apply, and you might not get in. But small press is not like that. You pick a booth, you get it. If they got a space, you got it. So it might not be good for you for this year, but I would say that, absolutely it's been worth it. Even outside of making a small profit, absolutely it's been worth it in countless other ways that will help you grow your business as an author, an indie publisher. And you got to make that shift. That's the other thing. You got to make the shift from, this costs a lot as an author, to what do I want the publisher who believes in my work to do for my book?
Mm-hmm.
And would you expect, if you were at Tor, would you expect Tor to have you at New York Comic Con? Why would you expect them to do that? And why won't you do that for yourself? Those are the questions that I would then sort of put back. Even if it takes you 2 years of saving to get there. Readers are waiting for that book, and they might not get it if you're not there. They certainly won't know about you if you're not there. Unless you give me your name, and then I'll put you on my list of other authors of color besides me. You can send me your name and email me through your website with your name and your book, and I'll put you on my list. Which is on my blog, and I'm planning to update my website with that as well. So, yeah.
You should probably think about being, what do you call those, the life coach or something. You'd be really good at that, I think.
I can't. Thank you. I'm trying to coach myself. All this stuff I'm telling you, I tell myself in the mirror. That's it's not out of judgment or sitting on high. It's because, when oh gosh, let me give you a recent example. I did an ad on Bleeding Cool for my books, which is supposed to be, a website, one of the top websites for sort of pop culture stuff. And I saw New York Comic Con folks advertising the convention there, and I thought, well, my audience is their audience. Maybe this is a place I should be. And the ad was $500. And I was like, what? I mean, it just, in my whole release budget for the last year, that was nowhere in there. Nowhere in there at all. And I hemmed and I hawed. And the people, they were so nice. I emailed them. I was like, hey, I'd like an ad. Let me know if it's even remotely possible for a little indie author. Please let me know. And they emailed back, like, here's our sheet, here's what we think we might be able to do. This is the best price we can offer. And then they talked about how they could target the ads, different locations, tag them. They were so, so nice. But it was still $500. I was just like, oh, my gosh, I'm already going to New York Comic Con. It's the most expensive thing I do all year. And I was just hemming and hawing, and I thought, that was me, Cerece, the author. Mm-hmm. Then I thought about Cerece Lion Sky Publishing. And I thought, Lion Sky Publishing is charged with finding new markets for the Order of the Seers trilogy and exposing it to new readers. Now, Lion Sky Publishing should stop being cheap, because Lion Sky Publishing takes all the money from Cerece Rennie Murphy's book. And what are they doing with her money? How are they reinvesting it to help raise her visibility? And when I looked at it through that lens, I thought,
it was clear.
It was clear.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what I would say.
That's great. I mean, if you look at it that way, it makes perfect sense. We have to change hats. And unfortunately, yes. I think the thing that slows us down is that exact thinking. We continue to wear the hat, not just of the writer, but then the hat of the mom, wife, partner, who's I'm taking away family, money, time, whatever, going toward this selfish project of mine, and that's also yes, and so it's like we got to learn to take off those hats, and say, okay, I got to take off mommy hat and spouse hat, and got to take off employee of the month hat, and now I got to put on my author hat, and then I take off my author hat, and I got to put on my publisher and marketer hat,
Yes.
And
then you don't even know what hat you're wearing.
That's right. You got but with singular purpose when you get, I think, to marketing. And that's the hard thing, because you've got to be almost selfish in marketing. To say, I've got to do what's best for this product.
Yes.
The best thing for this product. And I can't let these other roles that I have in my life get in the way of me doing the best thing that I can for this product, which I know is going to benefit all of us ultimately.
Yes.
And like you said, it all goes back to your concept of having faith, believing in your project, believing in your story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know that we have 15 minutes left. That's it. So, I mean, if there's anybody else that has any questions in the chat room, and I may have missed some, so I've got to kind of go back. Let's see. Oh, there was a question, and it was, who do you enjoy reading?
Oh, wow. Well, okay. I've been reading a lot of indie authors lately and really loving it. So I'm going to start with them, and then I'll go to some of the, I guess, more familiar authors. First and foremost, I enjoy reading a fantastic paranormal mystery series by Lynn Emery called the LaShawn Russell Mysteries. And they're just fantastic. She finished her third book, and I'm not sure where she is, and I hope there's a fourth one coming soon. I know she's working on some other projects called Only by Moonlight. Her writing is lush. Lynn is a 15-year, she's a veteran of this industry. She's been traditionally published, she's indie published. She's just a wealth of knowledge and an incredibly generous person. But her writing is lush and very descriptive. It's kind of like you can taste it, you can feel it, you can touch it, which I love that kind of writing. And plus, it's her story is based in Louisiana, and I have a fascination with the South. So I just love, hearing all the descriptions and the colloquialisms, and it's just a feast. So I'm really enjoying her work right now. Keith Gaston writes one of my favorite characters ever, Taurus Moon Relic Hunter. How do I describe Taurus Moon as Indiana Jones mixed with Ferris Bueller with a Shaft swagger? Because his stuff, yes, it's funny, it's adventure, and it's all you would expect from fantasy turned on its ear and turned into something completely new and fresh. He's got a new book out, Magic and Mayhem, which was, I think, was it featured? I can't remember if it's a featured book on your site or not. But it is just, and it's one of my treats now that I have finished my own series. Milton Davis and Balagoon Oyatade did a steampunk anthology, which is just, have you read it?
I have one of the stories in it.
You have one? Oh, my gosh, which one is it? Tell me. I don't have the book in front of me because I've read the whole anthology, and I loved it. The entire thing kicked such serious butt. I'm sorry. I don't want to curse on your show.
The Path of the Ironclad Bison.
Oh, I loved that. Are you going to continue that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Because you left me kind of wanting on that. I loved it, and I was like, wait, no, I need more. I need a lot more. So I hope to get a lot more from you.
Yeah, and that was a great project when Milton wrote the first story, and I wrote him back, and I said, you have got to do something with this, because for me, he's very sword and soul, and I do love the sword and soul.
Yeah.
But this thing, steampunk, to me, is so African American because it is still the beginning of the industrial age. When this is when we are here, we as the people are making our mark. A lot of these things that we're talking about, these machines, these ideas, a lot of these were created by people of color, by black people in this country.
Absolutely.
And that's why I love it so much. It's like we never have had a form of writing that brings us as a people into alternative history. And this thing brings us into alternative history, not always as, the slave or, the person who escaped from slavery. No, this is completely different. People, who have their own places, their own communities, their own scientists, the world is different. And I just absolutely loved it. And I told him, I said, this is probably one of the most important contributions that you are going to make into writing, to do this, to change the way that we think about ourselves in the past. Everybody else can write about themselves in the past in such glowing terms, and we, especially African Americans, have been loath to view ourselves in glowing terms, always, cowed and victimized, and this just, as you say, turns that on its ear. It is.
I loved your story. That's so funny. And now I'm really glad I didn't know it was you, because I might have been a little nervous. But no, I love that story. I loved it so much. Oh, describing the caves and everything you do with, I loved it.
Thank you.
I'm so glad. No, I love the anthology. In fact, at last year's New York Comic Con, to celebrate Black Speculative Fiction Month, Milton gave away 2 copies of the Steampunk anthology, and I gave it to a librarian in the Bronx. And I saw her just yesterday. She said those kids are eating that book up. They absolutely love it.
Think so.
They're just giving me things. Yeah,
because this is their world, and to me, it's like you get to make the world, and not just any world. This world, the world you live in, the places you know, and you touch them and you've seen them, but you can recreate it however you want, and that's so important. I mean, I digress by saying many years ago, my husband and I were at an elementary school in Philadelphia. We were in school, and they asked us to do a reading program, and we went there to this reading program, and these children didn't know who Dr. Seuss was, didn't know how to rhyme. This book they were having the kids read was about some people going to becoming squatters in some tenement somewhere. Like, this is not what children in 3rd grade should be reading. They should be reading Dr. Seuss. They should be reading rhyming. They should be reading, stories, about fantastic tales. And that's the thing that we need to give our children, the gift of fantasy, because that's what they have been robbed of. This constant, like I was on the issue of keeping it real. You got that all day. What you need is fantasy. To go
life is ready to kick you in the butt anytime you're ready. But once your innocence is only there for a little while.
Right.
And the thing is, it propels you your entire life.
Absolutely.
That little bud. But
Absolutely.
once it's gone, it's gone. And I don't know why we're so in a hurry to get rid of the innocence of children. I don't really know. Maybe we're just too lazy to preserve it, because certainly in this world it takes an incredible level of effort to preserve the innocence of our children.
Yes.
But I don't know. Maybe we're just too lazy. I'm not really sure what that is. But once it's gone, and it can never be regained.
No,
so I'm with you.
Hold on,
I'm with you on the Dr. Seuss.
Yeah,
and some more. And some more.
Yeah, but this has really been a fantastic interview. I have really thoroughly enjoyed it. I know while we were talking that Jarvis went online and with Kindle and bought all 3 of your books. So.
Well, thank you. I hope that you enjoy them.
Yeah, I mean, he's so excited now. He's to go out and buy all 3 books. But that's the way it should be.
The wait is over. The wait is over, like the ad said.
But this is what we have to do, and this is what we should be doing when we are producing our books. We need to be reading each other's books. We need to be writing the reviews and the commentary for each other's books to make sure that they are getting the look. Yes.
Can I say something on that? I will say, before I was an author, as a reader, I've always been an avid reader. I never wrote a book review because I didn't think that my opinion who would care what I thought about a book? Yeah, I loved it. But, I mean, even my favorite, right, like Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, I never wrote a review because I thought, I'm just a little peon. You know what? Your opinion, readers out there, your opinion matters. If you love a book, if you like a book, tell somebody. And the best way to tell somebody is to write a review. Now, now that I get that, I review every single thing that I read, as long as I like it. I don't leave flame reviews. That's just silly. But as long as I like it, I review every single thing that I read. It's so critical.
Yeah, and I'm behind on my rule. I made up that every month I would get a book, from one of our authors, BSFS, or any other, female or African American, the diverse author, and read it and review it. Get something read and reviewed, so that people start to get those responses, those comments, because that's how they get people more interested. That's how we get our names and our books out there by, somebody who, I'm like I said, maybe nobody, but somebody would say, oh, yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, well, that person liked it, and I like that other thing they said something about. So I might like this, too. So we got to think about it in those terms as well.
Those terms, absolutely.
And if it takes just a few minutes just to say a few words, I really like this magical plot, really enjoyed it, you should read it. Something, anything.
Amazing imagery.
Yes.
Penelope has amazing imagery in her steampunk story. See, I can say that.
Okay.
I read it.
But, I mean, I am just thrilled, that you've spoken to us. I mean, I feel like I'm going to get off the phone and write.
Go do it. Go tell your story, Penelope. That's right, because after your story in the steampunk, see, now I know you. You're not just sort of abstracts. Oh, now, yeah. See, I got time now. I just finished my trilogy. We're about to get to know each other.
Yeah,
because I want some continuation steampunk story now. But no, I loved it, and this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that William had his hot date, because I never would have been able to do the interview, and it has been such a joy. And I really, really thank you on behalf of the BSFS, on behalf of Jarvis Sheffield, who runs the site and brings us all together. I know that I don't know if I know he says being kicked out of the site, but I don't know if there's anything you wanted to wind us up with this evening. Anything you need to say, Jarvis? What's coming up in the next week? Coming up, the next interview. I do not know. He may have also been kicked out of me. I'm not talking. He's muted. Okay.
We're gonna wrap it up.
Okay. So now we are at 9:58. We're 2 minutes from stop time, and I know that it's almost 10 o'clock here, and I'm Central Time, and those of you all who are on the East Coast, we're knocking on 11 o'clock, and we're just grateful that everybody could be here, this evening to participate, be here next week to participate. I know that, William will be back. If there's anything anybody in the chat room needs to say or do, let us know right quick, because we're getting ready to move on. I know that, I think that, no, I do not believe that he's coming back. So just let me know. Well, he's at 3 minutes, so I guess that he's getting ready to take us off in the next couple of minutes. But, again, everybody, thank you very much. Cerece, this is right quick. This is what we've done the last 2 minutes. Facebook page. Where do we find you on Facebook?
Cerece Rennie Murphy. That's my fan page right there.
Okay.
And it's and CereceRennieMurphy.com is my website.
Is your website. And are you still on Twitter and Tumblr and all this? Yes. And so she's on Twitter. So, do that Twitter thing that Twitter people do that I don't do, because I don't do Twitter. So, but do that to her. Whatever that thing is that they do that to her.
Whatever that thing, that thing is.
Do that to her.
I'm on Twitter at Cerece R. Murphy, because Rennie was too long. So Cerece R. Murphy on Twitter. And I don't tweet that often, but I try to tweet something that means something to me when I do, which is
All
the
right.
only way I can figure out how to do it.
All right. That's wonderful. And we have, and you know, she is on BSFS. She is a member. If you want to catch up with her, that's a good place to catch up with her.
Yes.
Buy the books. There's no excuse for us. We have to buy the books. And we can make all the excuses in the world, I can't do, don't have, but we can get these books on Kindle and read them on our PC on Kindle, as well as having the physical book. We can do all these things. So there's no more excuses for us. So let's stop making excuses, and let's get out there and support each other like we know we should. So this has been the October 10th, 2014 edition of the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, sponsored by Black Science Fiction Society. Thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you so much, Jarvis, for putting this thing together this evening. And we will see and hear the rest of you all next week. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.